Welcome, everybody, to another edition of News and Views. My name is Elmira. I am your host. Today, we are talking about divorce, the 50% divorce rate myth. Okay, how did we come here? As I prepare for these shows, I'm often researching or some ideas will drop into my spirit. And I was going to make this week's news story about marriage, and something kept creeping up. I kept reflecting back over my life and hearing this 50% of marriages end in divorce. And now here recently, maybe in the past, I'd say 10 to 15 years with the red pill community, there's this other statistic floating around that 70% of divorces are started by women. And I'm like, what's up with this? Let me do my research. Let me do my digging. I really got to find out what's going on. We gonna hop into it because I don't believe in delaying the process. I got a lot to share with you, and as always, this is for you to form your own opinion. Elmira is not here to preach. Neither am I here to teach. Well, I will say I do teach. I will give myself that nod. But the biggest thing is for you to form your own opinion. The 50% divorce rate myth. All right. First of all, what is divorce? Let's define so we know what we're talking about, because there can be other types of divorce when it comes to the Christian church. I even heard a pastor say that divorce could be any type of division. Look at the word die, di, divide, separate. But in the cases of this news story in this presentation, we will characterize divorce as a separation between a husband and a wife. So they had a legal agreement and then they decided to no longer have the legal agreement. That's all it is. And I will say most of the time divorce, remember I just said legal agreement, when we look at this particular statistic, it doesn't take into account spiritual marriages. Yesterday I was watching something, and I kind of knew this because my parents had a spiritual marriage. I don't know all the details of that because neither my dad told me or my mom. My dad was more vocal than my mom is. She only just recently said, "Oh, me and your dad didn't have a real marriage." I kind of knew that. And what is a real marriage anyway? It's a real marriage if it's sanctioned by the state. But there are some communities like the Hebrew Israelites, which at one point in time my dad was a member of the Hebrew Israelites. They have something called a spiritual marriage. And the reason this came up recently is I was listening to an interview from Sean Stockman's of Boys to Men, his mistress of 9 years, and she was describing their spiritual marriage. So in this case, we're not talking about those marriages, and this is going to be one of the reasons why the that stat is a myth too, because it's only taking into account marriages on paper. Because before what? Because when Obama took office and what was that? 2008 and 2012, he was in the presidency here in the United States. There was no legal gay marriage. So even those divorces didn't count when this stat was put out in the 1970s. Okay, let's continue. I just wanted to lay the ground with what we're saying is a divorce. This is our first point. We're going to dive into 3 points today. The first one is no one ever took the time to fact check this. They just started spurting it out in 1970, 1980, whatever. Oh, we 50% divorce. And riddle me this. I bet if I had my banking, I need to take a time travel back. And I really should interview some women on this. And I have watched some broadcasts speaking on this, but if I had my my guess, it was men who stated this statistic. because they wanted to put the fear into the women. They wanted to put the fear into their children or whatever. It's so many things wrapped up in this. I want to show you this first clip from Alice Falcone. He has a channel called Unlearning. Well, he does these unlearning clips, and one of the things he says we need to unlearn is 50% of marriages don't end in divorce. Let's see what he has to say, and then I'll give you some commentary.
It's time for some more unlearning, and today, 50% of marriages end in divorce. Or do they? Nope. First of all, it's a dumb thing to measure because it doesn't take into consideration length. So the couple that held hands while the water came in on the Titanic counts exactly the same as someone who got hit by a bus on their honeymoon. Oh, but also, it doesn't take into consideration overachievers. If you stay married forever, you only get to count for one, but if someone gets divorced 5 times, they get to be counted 5 times. But even given all of those caveats to the statistic, no one actually bothered to measure because it would be too hard. So a group of people put together the statistic, and you might be wondering, did they have a political agenda? Ha ha ha, of course. And what they did was the lazy math. They took the number of people who got married this year and the number of people who divorced this year, and they compared them, and those are mostly not the same people. You're basically saying that 50% of apples end in oranges. And now the craziest part? It's not even 50. If you do their bad math on their made up numbers, you get 32%. So we as a society need to split up with the 50-50 myth. It's time for some more unlearning, and today, 50% of marriages end in divorce. Or do they?
He said it. He said we need to divorce. We need to separate ourselves from the 50% myth. And let me give you the reasons why. And I might add some as well. He said the length of that marriage does not matter. So for a couple who stayed married for 3 years versus the one who stayed married for 23 years, it doesn't matter. They count the same. Also, the overachievers, the one who had that extended marriage, ranked the same as the repeat offenders. Like, this is some bad math. I'm a mathematician myself. I love algebra, trigonometry, calculus, all of that. I like looking at mathematics, the numbers. This ain't how you do stats. Like, this is not how you do. This ain't what my teacher taught me in school. Not, and I know this ain't what you learned either. So the people who got, and I know several of these folks, the people who got divorced 2 times, 3 times, 4 times, they count the same. They get to put more times into the bucket than the ones who only got divorced once. That ain't fair. So now we got this swayed number. All right, and here's the other thing. They did bad math. These people needed to be, you remember when George Bush had that thing called No Child Left Behind? I think it's still in effect, right? But when it was instituted, he was saying, oh, the children ain't learning what they need to. They're on the short bus. That's what they sound like when they created this statistics. They was on the short bus. Because how are you going to do this? The number of people who got married versus the number of people who got divorced, you're not even comparing apples to apples. So, what have we been doing this whole time? We're here now in 2026 and beyond, and we've been believing some statistics, something they called a fact from the 1970s. And what they're banking on is that you're not going to research it. You're not going to look it up because your pastor says it, this other teacher said it, the divorce lawyer told you it, the marriage counselor told you the same statistics, your parents repeated the statistics. It's the thing with our subconscious programming. The more we hear something, repetition, 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 we begin to believe it. And it doesn't even have to be rooted in fact. So that's why people are still saying this, knowing if they were to even look at their own life, the married couples in their own life, and did just the simple math, all they got to do is look at 20 married couples they know and see that 17 of them are still together. And you're like, and probably everybody could do that. Same statistic, but where they get this 50%? Questions you have to ask. Why do you believe what you believe? This is a myth. It's not the truth. Here's the thing. Truth only is what you believe. It's your perception of the world, your viewpoint of the world. So it's if the powers that be, the United States of America, the UK, I can name any country. It could be Australia, South Africa, Czechoslovakia, mind you. It could be Mexico. If they can get you to believe that 50% of marriages end in divorce, they can make you afraid to get married. They can make you afraid to get divorced. They can make you afraid to rise in love. It's so many fears built on that one statistic. They can make you afraid that God is going to come crashing down on you if you get a divorce. It's so much fear built in this thing, this one statistics that has survived. I want to also point out a lot of people were not alive when this was initiated. So that leads to further belief. So you don't even know where the root is if you're in your 30s. Even those in the 40s, some in the 20s, you're like, oh, I believe it. I believe it. I believe it. I trust in what the people who came before me. But I will say this as a nod to Generation Z, y'all don't believe nothing. And I love it because you question everything. And that's, Elmira says that's the way to be. Question, 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 question everything. Cause that's the way I am here. Y'all know that's me over here on News and Views. Okay, I got another clip to display. Let's get to it. And this one is from the speech professor. It's a similar, he's stating a similar thing. However, he is basing his claims and he's supporting it on the Diary of a CEO. So the Diary of a CEO had this lawyer on, and you'll get to see what's stated here. Let's listen. I think I'm going to have to. Facebook always has this thing where you got to turn up the volume before you play it. So come on, Facebook. Okay. Let's start.
56%
I'm
chance
going to
that your
start
marriage will
from
end.
the beginning.
If you marry, there's about a 56% chance that your marriage will end in divorce.
No, there isn't. And he knows that. He's just expecting you to not any other people repeat it over the years. It
Okay,
originally
let
came
me
from stats in
restart
the
that because I
1970s.
skipped over something. Give me a sec.
If you marry, there's about a 56% chance that your marriage will end in divorce.
No, there isn't. And he knows that. He's just expecting you to not fact check him because you've heard so many other people repeat it over the years. It originally came from stats in the 1970s, dividing divorces in a year by marriages in the same year, which is comparing two completely different groups of people. The actual divorce rate has been declining for 40 years. And if you want to understand why it was even that high in the first place, no-fault divorce laws in the 70s and 80s meant women could finally leave marriages without proving abuse or adultery in court. Women gaining access to education and financial independence meant they no longer had to stay in bad marriages just to survive. So, of course, there was a spike of people escaping. He's using that spike as his baseline, and he's doing it confidently, knowing he won't be fact-checked.
If we consider failure staying together miserable for the children or staying together for financial, economic reasons, and then we add that to the 56% that end in divorce, it's another 20% probably.
Probably is doing a lot of heavy lifting in that sentence. He said probably, like my 5-year-old when I ask her who drew on the wall, and she says probably the cat, but we don't have a cat. He took an already debunked statistic, added 20% that he pulled from absolutely nowhere, and presented it as analysis. And look, I've literally made hundreds of videos about the invisible labor that wives and mothers go to when their husbands treat them like surrogate mommies, but you can't just throw out made-up numbers to make a point. That's not how argumentation works. I know that as a professor of argumentation, and I know that he knows that because he's a lawyer.
But I mean, think about what that adds up to. That means that you've got something that fails 75% of the time. That's a negligent activity.
So let's talk about a real statistic since he won't. College-educated women who marry after 25 divorce around 25% of the time, the lowest rate of any demographic. And the reason that 25% number exists, so the reason that divorce rates in general keep dropping, is because when women have education, financial independence, and the freedom to actually choose their partner instead of settling out of necessity, they build stronger marriages. The data doesn't say marriage is a negligent activity. The data says marriage currently works better than it ever has, specifically because people are more prepared for it and women aren't being forced into marriage in their early 20s because of outdated notions of a ticking biological clock or because they don't have access to checking accounts. But I guess women with education and autonomy are building the most successful marriages we've ever seen doesn't make for a very scary soundbite. Doesn't really go viral the same way, does it?
Wow. Okay. They want to show me Ralph. Okay.
If you marry, there's about a
I
56.
got hold on a second. Let me put that on pause right there. Y'all can tell what I've been watching. I've been on the new edition still from the last week's news story. Y'all know about all that. Okay, speech professor. He is speaking some facts here. I'm like, preach, preach, preach. Because he said something. He is a professor of argumentation. Anytime you make an argument, a statistic, you have to back it up. I cannot go out here saying that I've cured 50% of people with this particular herbal remedy, or this medication. I got to prove it. I have a friend who works in clinical research, and that's what she does. That's what her companies do. They have to prove this stuff. You can't arbitrarily say, and he said probably, like, oh, probably the cat drew on the wall. There's no probably. Now, there is probability, but no probably in this. This is where you have to question, where is this coming from? Especially since and he stated it, especially since women who are highly educated today actually have better faring marriages. Listen to that, because they're not being forced into the marriage. They actually want the marriage. They actually desire the marriage. And I can speak for myself. I have yet to be married. I do desire to be married, but not for, oh, I got to be in love. I got to have a baby. Da, da, da. Now, that was my thoughts back in my 20s, because I was taught. I was taught these statistics. I was taught these things that all women in today's time are told. And then you have to unlearn it. You have to say, wait a minute, is this true? I gotta assess this for myself. 40 years the divorce rate has been declining. And so in the 1970s, they had this, you probably already know this, no contest divorce was available. That's what that lawyer probably won't tell you, because he might be one of the ones who want to bring it back, who want to take it away. I will be getting to that later in this presentation about the connection between no fault divorces. They want to bring that back, and Donald Trump. Donald Trump and Ronald Reagan. Okay, let's continue because we got more in this class, y'all. Where is my I feel like I be losing stuff sometimes. Oh, there it is. It's not necessarily me losing stuff. I'm just losing my way. I am losing my way. Losing my way. See, I gotta sing my way. Sing my way. Singing my way. Okay, here we go. This is our second point. Our first point again was nobody analyzed the statistics. They just went with it. Don't do that with anything. If somebody's trying to sell you on a stat, it could be your husband, your wife, the politician, your boss. Ask them to prove it. Show me the money, show me the facts. Here's the second thing about why this is a myth. There is shame behind divorce. And when you have shame associated with divorce, that could mean people get divorced or they avoid divorce. It could be all kinds of things wrapped into this statistic. because of the church. The church wanted to put this statistic out to make you not want to get a divorce. So they're saying, oh, 50%, oh, we gonna. I was reading with the research of this story. I was reading some things about Jerry Falwell and different pastors back in the 1970s and the 1980s and what they were saying about divorce. There is collective shame when it comes to divorce. Let's hear it from Joan. Joan is a colleague of mine. She is a conscious love architect. She uses human design, other tools to help you develop conscious love, because that's what helps you to maintain that marriage, maintain that solid relationship for you. She was on my show. It's almost been 2 years ago on Heart to Heart. It might have been 3 years ago, actually. She spoke about how her divorce was a scarlet letter in the community. Let's hear what she says.
They didn't even hide it. Really? Talking behind my back, but people came to me and said, "Joe, we can't be friends anymore because you're divorced."
Are you serious?
Yep. Yep.
Wow.
Yeah. And today, that particular friend who told me that, she's divorced now. But again, for me, I wasn't wishing her ill. I said, that's where you are. That's your level of consciousness, and that's okay, right? But so for divorced people, there's just a lot more. There's a lot more shame. They didn't even hide it.
Really?
Talking behind my back, but people came to me and said, "Joe, we can't be friends anymore because you're divorced."
Are you serious?
Yep. Yep.
Wow.
Yeah. And today, that particular friend who told me that, she's divorced now. But again, for me, I wasn't wishing her ill. I said, that's where you are. That's your level of consciousness, and that's okay, right? But so for divorced people, there's just a lot more. There's a lot more shame. They didn't even.
Yeah, she had a friend or maybe multiple people in her life who said, I can't associate with you. One explicitly stated, the others probably just started treating her differently. We can't be friends because you got a divorce. Wow. And this was not that long ago, people. This was maybe 5, 6 years ago. I'm not sure. Something like that. It's recent. It wasn't in the 70s. It wasn't in the 80s. I can tell you that. So, how are we treating people who get a divorce? All right, that's something to question. I got another clip that I want to show by Joan because from Joan, it's displaying the financial aspects of divorce and the shame associated with that, and maybe something you had not considered. Divorce is costly, she says.
Historically, marriage was more of a financial contract before it was about emotions and building together and growing together. It was always about the finances. And what happens if you no longer want to play the game? Well, you pay heavily. So we have a society built on these legal and financial structures that make it easy for you to get married. Because for me, when I was going to get married, it's like 5 minutes and you're just like, But then when it was time to get a divorce, oh my God, did they not make it very extremely difficult for you and very costly as well. So you can imagine for a lot of people, like they're afraid of losing what they built. If you're the primary earner, that's you have to leave 50% of whatever it is that you built, right? Or just the sheer trauma, because it's traumatizing trying to navigate the legal system, dealing with lawyers, going to court. Historically, marriage was more of a financial contract before it was about emotions and building together and growing together. It was always about the finances. And what happens if you no longer want to play the game? Well, you pay heavily. So we have a society built on these legal and financial structures that make it easy for you to get married. Because for me, when I was going to get married, it's like 5 minutes and you're just like, But then when it was time to get a divorce, oh my God, did they not make it very extremely difficult for you and very costly as well. So you can imagine for a lot of people, like they're afraid of losing what they built. If you're the primary earner, you have to leave 50% of whatever it is that you built, right? Or just the sheer trauma, because it's traumatizing trying to navigate the legal system, dealing with lawyers, going to court. Historically,
All right. She lets us know the historical context of a marriage. A lot of us may overlook that, especially in Western countries. We have this romanticized version of the marriage, the wedding, everything, when really and truly it's a legal contract. Even we can see that in the United States and other countries too. You have to go to the courthouse to get married. Now, I'm not talking about the spiritual marriages, but it's a legal construct. And many of us don't think about that, but that's the programming. That's where the myth and other myths come into play because they want you to think that marriage is just love, when really it helps the country, the legal system, both on both ends. It helps them for you to get married and it helps them for you to get divorced. Just so what she stated, it's so costly to get a divorce. And that's what that divorce lawyer was talking about earlier from Diary of a CEO. Other divorce lawyers celebrate you getting a divorce. They're like, yes, bring on the money, bring on the contest, bring it on because I'm going to get paid. It's all fear based. It's not based in love. None of this stuff is based in love. When you have to be ashamed of you separating from something that doesn't work anymore, how is that loving? For you to be banished from your community, your friends and family because you got a divorce. It's fear based. And it's making the divorce, the separation seem worse than it actually is. And when we view things as fear, they want us to stay away from it. They're saying, oh, 50% get a divorce. That means don't get married. And maybe it's actually the marriage is what's benefiting you too. And as I stated earlier, still benefiting the state. What else do they try to make us fear? As an entrepreneur, I can get down with this. They always say, I don't know what the exact quote is now because they keep shifting it. Oh, 80% of businesses fail in the second year and the first year. I don't know. I've been at enough business events and people keep repeating that, repeating, repetition, programming, subconscious programming. But if you were to look around again at the business owners that you know, how many of them have survived and sustained past the second years? Probably a lot of them you know. So why you keep even including that in your speech? Oh, this many businesses. It's fear. It's they want us to be in fear, not in love. There's not many. I want you to reflect on this. How many statistics that you have heard recently in the last year, the last 3 years, 5 years, 7 years, 10 years have been positive? Like, weigh them. What's the number of positive statistics that say 80% of women are marriage material or 80% of men? They don't be talking about that. They like to talk about the fear stuff. Even with cancer, they're like, oh, about 30% of people might get colon cancer. They ain't talking about the 70% that might not. So you really got to be logical about this thing. Most of the time, I'm very spiritual, but then there's other times I'm logical when it comes to the stats. So if you telling me 30% of people might not survive from this cancer, so that tells me I got a 70% chance. They ain't focusing on the 70%, they focusing on the 30%. What sense does that make? It don't make no damn sense, y'all. So listen, give it up. Like the man said earlier, divorce, separate from the statistic. Sometimes you got to clear your mind of the parasites, clear your mind of the shame. I talked to a guest today on Healing is War about shame. We have so much shame around divorce. What if it doesn't work? What if it doesn't go to death? Who told you this? Like, you got to unlearn a lot of the stuff that you learned because it don't make no sense. Because it worked It may have worked in a previous time, but it ain't working now. My thing is, if it's not working for you, why are you doing it? It just don't make no sense. No sense whatsoever. That was point two. Let's move on to point number three. A lot of what we are experiencing now, and I'd actually discussed this on a previous news story, is rooted in the 1980s. Because according to cycles, astrologically, cardology, all of these things, we are in these, it could be a 30-year cycle, a 40-year cycle, all of these things. You might notice there are some similarities between what we were experiencing in the United States in 1980 and what we experienced in the United States 2016 and beyond, because there were two monumental figures, President Ronald Reagan and President Donald Trump. They have some similarities and they have some differences. Both of them, during both of their times, they were saying, okay, America has gone too far liberal, so we need to bring them back and convince people to stay married. You heard that with Charlie Kirk. Charlie Kirk was a conservative proponent with Turning Point USA. That's one of the things he spoke on. That was one of his spearheads. One of his major speaking points was we need to get these people back married again because they ain't got enough marriages. They're trying to say the people are dying because they ain't marriage. They not married. That is the number one, they're saying it's the number one cause to the destruction of society is people not being married. And I hear it talked about all the time among the quote unquote black community, where they will say, "Oh, it's too many single women." But what do we see? Like, if we were able to, let's not look at statistics, because again, I'm asking you to question the statistics. If you look at the people you actually know, not the people they show you on TV or they say the black people are acting this way, maybe there's a huge majority of the people you know that were raised by single moms. How do they act? I can say for myself, I was raised by a single mom. Yes, my dad was involved to an extent. I had my uncles, my grandmother, all kinds of people around. Grandfather on the other side too, grandmother and grandfather. I turned out well, me and my siblings. I know other people like that. I got a friend, Juliana, in the UK. Her daughters are growing up well. Single mother. They'll say, "Single mother, you're not married, unmarried. Everything is ruining. You're ruining the country. You're ruining the kids." Okay, let's look into it. I found this. I give courtesy to Redacted History, Andre White, for this. He did a podcast slash video essay on Ronald Reagan to Donald Trump pipeline. As we play this video, I will be pausing to give my take on some of the statements he makes.
Cities where they live. For those who've abandoned hope, we'll restore hope and we'll welcome them into a great national crusade to make America great again.
Donald Trump, let's indulge the thought that you are going to run for the presidency of the United States in the year 2016. What's the slogan going to be?
I think my slogan would be, "Make America Great Again."
Make America Great Again. The iconic four-word slogan that has reverberated through the minds of Americans for the last decade and a half, for better or for worse. But where did this slogan come from? If you ask the average American, you'll get the answer that it originated from the mind of Donald Trump, the country's 45th and 47th.
Again, this is just like the 50% divorce rate stat. Some of these people, MAGA, Make America Great Again, were not alive when Ronald Reagan was in office, so they don't even know he said it. So they can sell you a bold-faced lie because you don't know what existed before you. That's why it's important, as we do on this channel, to study history, hidden history. Where did this originate from? Is Donald Trump the originator of this phrase? Is Donald Trump the originator of these policies? What are you following? What are you believing? What are you preaching? What are you repeating?
President. But in actuality, the slogan was first used by Ronald Reagan during his campaign for the Oval Office in 1980. And to me, this speaks to a bigger phenomenon: how a charismatic, acting businessman took the country's political field by storm and paved the way for a disciple of the same discipline.
Wait a minute, don't that sound familiar? Like people draw the similarities, and this is why this particular myth hasn't died, because it comes back, it rises back up. It's like one of them weeds in your yard. You snipped it off last summer and it come back. But hey, that's what it is. It wants to survive. It wants to come back. It wants to make a comeback 40 something years later.
To do the exact same thing over 40 years later. There simply is no Donald Trump without Ronald Reagan. I'm Andre, and this is Redacted History. Regardless of how you voted, some of you may be curious as to how exactly we got to this moment in history that we currently sit. How did Donald Trump win not one, but two presidential elections? And I can assure you, Donald Trump's rise to be the 45th and 47th president did not start in 2020. It didn't start in 2016. It started in 1979 when he was still buying up properties in New York City and being sued for being the world's worst landlord ever. Donald Trump and Ronald Reagan have similarities across the board. Both survived assassination attempts. Both of them were divorced pro-lifers. Both were former registered Democrats turned Republican. And if you analyze the way that Donald Trump rose to power and eventually became president, you can see that he ran an incredibly similar playbook to Ronald Reagan in more ways than one. And I'm not just referring.
Okay, I gotta highlight what he just said, a playbook, because this is what it is. This particular statistic is a playbook. They will throw it in your face, they will put it in the media, they will use a speaker like Charlie Kirk to state it over and over and over so it ingrains into your brain. Insane in the membrane, insane in the brain, because that's part of the play. You gotta know when you're being played.
To how they were both former charismatic media personalities. Both men even utilized the exact same slogan. Trump may have trademarked MAGA, but Reagan used it first in 1980.
The price of even a small home could be $200,000. And what about their parents trying to make ends meet right now? To stop inflation, we've got to put a ceiling on federal spending. We've got to crack down on waste, and we must lower our tax rates to encourage individual productivity. In California, where I was governor for 8 years, we went from near bankruptcy to financial help. We gave the taxpayers billions of dollars in tax relief, and we met the needs of our people. If we're going to stop inflation, we must do it now, not with bigger government. It takes better government. That's what we owe ourselves and our children. That's why I'm running for president.
Only one man has the proven experience we need: Ronald Reagan for president. Let's make America great again.
Modern day person would think that Trump was the one to coin it, but no, that was Reagan. So is Trump just Reagan 2.0? Not exactly. There are a few key differences. For starters, Reagan's image was much more clean-cut, Americana, wholesome, if you will. Reagan wanted nothing more than to serve in the military, but wasn't able to. Trump wasn't able to serve either. At least that's what his doctor said. They both ran a similar political playbook as well. Before Reagan's presidency in the 1970s, the Republican Party was in a slump. The party had only seen one two-term president since Calvin Coolidge in the 1920s. That was Dwight Eisenhower. Richard Nixon left a stain of embarrassment on the party, being impeached after the Watergate scandal, and never got to finish his second term, with his resignation coming about 570 days into that second term. And Gerald Ford was...
So you can kind of see with us giving these descriptors that the Republicans needed to sell America on a candidate because they hadn't won. It's almost like the Super Bowl, y'all. Super Bowl, NBA, any of this. We gotta sell the champion. Oh my goodness. Oh, they haven't won in years. The Cowboys haven't won in years. We gotta market so that they can win this year. Because we don't want the Chiefs to win again. We don't want the Patriots to win again. We sure don't want, I'm talking NCAA right here. We don't want UConn to win again. We don't want UNC, any of these teams to win again. They gotta lose. We gotta figure out a playbook so that we can win. Make America great again.
Forgettable. Democratic Party was more popular than ever, inching further and further left with each passing day. This was the era following inspirational presidents like John F. Kennedy and the civil rights legislator Lyndon B. Johnson. And with the passage of things like the Voting Rights Act of 1965, people who never had an opportunity before were starting to. The passage of the Civil Rights Acts of 1964 and 1968 improved conditions and prevented against discrimination for not only black people, but for all people of color. Women were becoming more and more independent. No-fault divorce had recently become an option in the past decade. So women...
Oh, check that. See what we're talking about. The no fault divorce came online right before Reagan's presidency. Mm-mm-mm. Because before that, women couldn't even get their own bank accounts, none of this, or they couldn't even file for a divorce, and they just had to stay and stick it out for life. You getting slapped upside the head, all kinds of stuff, all the stories I heard. It's too much.
could finally have a bank account and leave their husbands if they needed to. And the iconic Supreme Court decision involving Roe v. Wade in 1973 made access to abortion the law of the land regardless of which state you lived in. The idea was that people should have a right to privacy, and that privacy includes an abortion. The LGBTQ plus community was making their way out of the shadows and into a movement of being unapologetic and championing the gay liberation movement. The fabric of America was becoming more and more colorful, and with that colorization came pushback. Reagan was a symbol for the time behind the changes, a Christian Hollywood star from humble beginnings with a lovely family and a dedicated Christian homemaking wife. He wanted all of the same things that any Republican wanted: lower taxes, smaller government, less regulation, communism destroyed, and for the average American to feel motivated enough to pursue the American dream without needing a handout. But his skill was the ability to package these ideas in a way that was unlike anything anyone had seen before. Inspired by the fireside chats of Franklin Delano Roosevelt 4 decades prior, Reagan liked to speak directly to the American people. But before Ronald Reagan was the clear frontrunner for the party, he lost the Republican nomination in 1976 to Gerald Ford. Ford was the current president, and tradition had to prevail, even though Reagan was incredibly popular for the time. Gerald Ford would go on to lose the 1976 presidential election to Jimmy Carter, another loss for the Republican Party. Ronald Reagan insisted that he would have beaten Jimmy Carter. And of course, hindsight is 2020, we know now that Reagan would have indeed beaten Jimmy Carter. But there were a few critical shifts in between him losing the nomination in 1976 and becoming president of the United States, defeating Carter just 4 years later in 1980. The Conservative Political Action Conference, or CPAC, founded in 1964, had been working with Republicans like Reagan to strategize and vent their frustrations at the growing times. They developed out of the need to stage a comeback when Lyndon B. Johnson, a Democrat, beat Barry Goldwater in the mid-1960s.
Well, since the recovery began, 70% of the new jobs have been translated into opportunities for women, and black and other minority employment has risen twice as fast as all other groups. Minority family income has also increased at a rate over 40% faster than other groups. In addition, since 1983, 2.9 million people have climbed out of poverty, and the poverty...
Okay, pay attention there because here is President Ronald Reagan giving more stats. This is what they do. But you got to fact check the stats, even in these these speeches, when they stand up behind the podium, the State of the Union address. Don't just believe what you hear. 50% divorce. Why you believing it? Just because he the president. Just because she's a senator. She's your mama. He's your daddy. Why you believing him? You don't know them facts to be true.
Rate has declined at the fastest rate in more than 10 years. So think for a moment on what these statistics mean and the kind of political nerve and desperation it takes to try.
Okay, there we go. He's even trying to convince you that the statistics are what you believe. You heard it earlier. He is an amazing orator. He's an actor. How do we know that Ronald Reagan wasn't acting the entire time he was in the presidency? I'm just asking. We ask questions over here, inquiries, things that make you go,
Try to sell the American people on the idea that in the 1980s they never had it so bad. The truth is, we're in the 63rd month of this nonstop expansion. Real gross national product growth for 1987 was 3.8%, defying the pessimists and even exceeding our own forecast, which was criticized as being too rosy at the time, by more than 0.5%. Inflation is down from 13.5% in 1980 to only around 4% or less this year. And there's over 15 million new jobs. So believe me, I welcome this approach by the opposition. And I promise you
See, yet again, I gotta highlight this because I just want y'all to see how statistics can be misleading. They'll stand up there and tell you there's 15 million new jobs. They don't tell you where, how, when, how much they paying, how you got to qualify for them, who's likely to get them, how long is that job going to last, because it might be in an industry where that industry is only projected to be around for 5 years. And I can speak to something about that. There used to be a time where all of these cell phone pop up, like the accessories, cell phone places, kiosks or whatever. It ain't no more. Where the blockbusters? Where the movie galleries? So we gotta question these things when you hear these statistics. What do they mean? What's behind the statistics? When you pull back the curtain and you really see the numbers, the breakdown of the actual people and the demographics, what does it look like?
every time they use it. I'll just tell the story of a friend of mine who was asked to a costume ball a short time ago. He slapped some egg on his face and went as a liberal economist.
Unlike them, the average working American did not have time to think about politics. Most politicians, especially Republicans, were seen as elitists and out of touch. But what the average American did know was that money was tight. Jimmy Carter's presidency was marked by a recession. He inherited an economy from Gerald Ford that was not growing. Government spending and the rise in oil prices were some of the main reasons. The Heritage Foundation, yes, that Heritage Foundation, founded February 1973, was one group that was particularly born out of this frustration. The mission on their website reads, quote, Heritage's mission is to formulate and promote public policies based on the principles of free enterprise, limited government, individual freedom, traditional American values, and a strong national defense. What a coincidence. These were all of the same things that Reagan wanted. His team got to work, tapping into the base that would secure him the presidency. Reagan's bread and butter would be the South. Average Americans, Christian evangelicals, and conservative Democrats all wrapped into one.
Don't that sound familiar? We in the same type of times right here. Evangelicals, Christians, Charlie Kirk followers, all of it who are saying this is what we desire. But one thing I want to point out, because I've mentioned it here in our Starving for Peace story, don't allow them with these statistics to divide you. That's the other element of divorce. They're trying to get you hooked on the divorce. Follow love, follow the balance. Know that the Republicans and the Democrats is all in the same bed. They try to make it seem like they not. Oh no, we should have voted for Kamala Harris in 2025. No, no, it was supposed to be Donald Trump. Oh, I'm all about Obama. I'm about this one. I'm about that one. Oh, Jasmine Crockett. I mean, they just keep naming the names. I don't like Pam Bondi. I can name all these. They all in the same boat. Don't allow them to sway you with their rhetoric, with their statistics.
Initially, Carter had an advantage in the South because he was from the South. But that didn't matter now. At this time, there were two different versions of the Southern United States. The white people, who were still a little bitter from the Civil War and the progress minority groups were making. They wanted the old South back. And then there were the pockets of the liberal South made up of black people and their allies, often accused of being communists. Majority of black people, even to this day, live in the South despite that divide. But that's historical context for another day. And these two worlds would frequently collide. Ronald Reagan had to make a choice to try and convert black voters to his side who liked Jimmy Carter, or was he going to have to toe the line of racism to attract conservatives, Southern white voters? And we now know the decision that he would eventually make. And we now know that Carter versus Reagan, the election of 1980, wasn't even close from an electoral college and popular vote standpoint. The popular vote had Carter losing by 8 million votes, about 43 million to 35 million. And Reagan would lean heavily on the Heritage Foundation to map out that road to make America great again. They had a long list of recommendations for the president. It was an 1,100-page manual titled The Mandate for Leadership, and that manual was taken seriously. The Heritage Foundation proudly reports that, quote, nearly 2/3 of Mandate's 2,000 recommendations were adopted or attempted by the Reagan administration. Does that sound familiar? This might sound like deja vu, because in his first term, Donald Trump adopted about 2/3 of what the Heritage Foundation recommended to him, with the foundation's infamous Project 2025 looming over a second Trump presidency. Both Ronald Reagan and Donald Trump utilized their platforms to play into the fear that white Americans held towards the change that America was experiencing socially and racially during.
There we go again with that fear. If too many of the, I'm going to use a term and y'all don't even get on me. If too many of them Negroes get married, or if too many of those Negroes come up, they're encroaching on our freedom. They're encroaching on our communities. They're buying up all the houses. They're doing all of this stuff. They're being too successful. Oh no. Fear mongering. What about us? Oh, come on.
During their respective times. This was not new. It was born from the same pool of fear that white Americans held during the late 19th and early 20th centuries in the form of the lost cause narrative, the thought that the Civil War wasn't fought over slavery, and white Americans were largely in the right and were the real losers of the Civil War. In 2016, when Donald Trump was running for president for the first time, there was a large sector of America that was frustrated, not for good moral reasons, but for reasons. After Reagan, the years of Democratic presidents and Republican disappointments left the same base Reagan activated feeling left out once again. Their distrust of government had grown thanks to Bill Clinton's impeachment and George Bush's handling of the war in the Middle East. They wanted someone they felt they could trust, who was honest. They demanded politics to take on a new shape. Political conversations needed to be raw and unfiltered. They needed someone that was trustworthy, someone that would make a 1960s Republican housewife clutch their pearls. The government needed to be small, almost non-existent. With emotions high, the lines between facts and fiction became unclear, and Trump came out on top.
Yeah, so in essence, that's one of the reasons why Trump won in 2016, because the lines between fact and fiction were blurred. It's like that Robin Thicke song, Blurred Lines. And when they can blur those lines, they can have you believing anything. Oh, nobody's getting married. Oh, nobody's doing this. Oh, everything's going to pits. Oh, everybody is suffering. Oh, everybody. It's not true. If you believe it to be true, and if that's your experience in the timeline you're living on, then it will be true for you. Do not get caught up in these statistics. Do not get caught up in everybody else's fear. I'm going to use something that one of my colleagues, April Beverly, spoke on the other day. She is I call her a business advocate. She also has something called Air Pro, which is let me just stop this share while I talk about this real quick. Air Pro is an AI tool, and it's culturally not culturally sensitive, but culturally curated, meaning it's going to respond like a black person. It ain't going to just say everything all prim and proper and whatever else, because might not be the way you want to communicate with your clients. Here's one thing she said, because she's here in Atlanta like me. She said, don't go with this belief that nobody is spending money right now. Everybody's in a recession, because it's all lies. She stated, I just went to 2 major concerts here over the past 2 weeks, and they were packed. Both were sold out. Somebody spending money. And let me tell you, these were not white folks spending this money. It was black folks. At the New Edition Way tour, which I attended myself, it was another major concert that was packed out. And I applauded her. I said, you are right. Because they will have you believing, the statistics will have you believing, the politicians will have you believing that everybody is suffering. But when you really look around in your sector, in your crowd, are they really suffering? Or is it what you've been told? Analyze that. Assess it. No. We're past the age of believing. We are now in the age of knowing. And the only way to know it is to experience. So when you experience people in 2026, in April and March of 2026, spending buku money on leisure, they're not suffering. And she made it plain too. She said, yeah, these people were buying t-shirts, spending $50 on snacks at the concert. And I know this to be true because me and my boyfriend did it too. Because we had to pay to travel down there. We had to pay to park. We paid for the tickets. We paid for dinner after at the Waffle House. We paid for food at the function, food and drink. We got t-shirts. Even gave a tip to the guy playing drums outside. So don't let these people sell you these stats. I gotta drive this point home, because if your reality is not showing that, don't get swayed by the facts. Okay, we're gonna finish up this video.
Trump's legacy will forever be cemented as the president who helped the Supreme Court secure a large Republican majority and overturn Roe v. Wade, the president that banned Muslims and championed mass deportation. Even as unpopular as he seems, having never had more than a 50% approval rating and seen approvals as low as 34%, Donald Trump has yet again secured the presidency, and Republicans are in control of all 3 branches of government. The red hats don't just mean I'm a Republican. They mean I'm with Trump. I'm with Trumpism. And he is with me, for better or for worse. And in reality, the country already experienced a second Trump term. It happened between 1985 and 1989. Were we better because of it? No. Will we be better this time? I'll let you decide. For conservatives, I think it's safe to say that MAGA is not the same Republican Party of the past. It's transformed into something else that some say Ronald Reagan wouldn't even recognize. Or maybe he would. We would have to go to the grave and ask him. If you want to ask yourself how we got to a second Donald Trump presidency, weave through the last 50 years like a puzzle. And like many problems in modern day America, you will come up with 2 words: Ronald Reagan. Until next time.
Make America Great Again. You're talking about 4 words. I think it's a very precise slogan. I mean, that would probably be my slogan, Make America Great Again. Tremendous potential in this country, but we're not using it. We don't have the leadership.
For the first time ever, you can find this episode of the Redacted History Podcast in a visual format on the YouTube channel. You can find the link to that in the description below. Also, if you want to support the
Just
channel
like
in
he
a different...
said, I encourage you to go to his channel, Redacted History. He's got some phenomenal treatises. You'll want to check them out. And we have to take a look at how things have shifted, not just in the government. It's due to Ronald Reagan. Like I was telling you at the start of this point, all of this began in the 1980s. All of this, Roe versus Wade, 1973. The Heritage Foundation, founded in 1973. They had to do something, the conservatives had to do something to get on the defense after all of this other stuff happening within the nation, like the Civil Rights Act. So you really got to analyze the statistic. The statistics, 50% of divorce is a defense mechanism. It's not more of an offense. It could be seen that way, but not generally. All right, let's move on because I want to talk. When I heard him speak about the Heritage Foundation here, I wanted to do some research myself. I'm like, well, what is the Heritage Foundation? Because, of course, they played a role in Donald Trump's recent presidency and his presidency in 2016, and then Ronald Reagan. They are a think tank. There are many think tanks for a variety of reasons, but this is one of the premier think tanks. I actually use AI to do some research, and I'm just gonna peel back the curtains. You can see my questions on the Heritage Foundation. Here we go. I first asked, who is the Heritage Foundation? It's a prominent American conservative think tank based in Washington, D.C., founded in 1973 to promote policies based on free enterprise, limited government. You saw that in his video too. Their big mission, formulate and promote conservative public policies focusing on strengthening families, national security, and economic freedom. Project 2025, we see that there. They are a nonprofit, just like Turning Point USA. These are the founders. You can do extensive research on this yourself. 1973 by Paul Weyrich, Edwin Fuellner, and Joseph Coors. It's widely regarded as one of the most influential conservative research organizations in the United States, frequently providing research and policy proposals to lawmakers on Capitol Hill. Of course, we saw it with Ronald Reagan. We see it with Donald Trump. Now, the next question I said I'm pondering this too. What does the Heritage Foundation say about divorce? Because I'm just trying to see, what is this link? What is this link between the 1980s and current? The Heritage Foundation views divorce as a primary driver of social and economic instability in the United States. Their research and policy proposals emphasize that an intact two-person family is the ideal environment for children, and that the breakdown of this structure leads to significant negative outcomes for individuals and taxpayers alike. Okay, see, there goes that legal element there. The state wants to be involved with your taxes. There's an impact on society. The foundation argues that divorce tears apart the fundamental unit of American society. They link rising divorce rates to increasing poverty. But we just heard through this story, y'all heard the divorce rates have actually been declining. So what are they talking about? Look at this. It says rising divorce rates to increase poverty, higher crime, drug abuse, and educational failure. What they may be, I want this to be something you analyze and look into because this just dropped into my spirit. Maybe they are saying they don't like the fact that there's more white people getting divorced in the past 10 to 20 years. That's on them. That ain't on the remainder of the population. They might be mad that there's more gays getting married and staying married. There's more black people getting married and staying married. There's more Muslims getting married and staying married. I could go on with the list. Fiscal costs. Heritage claims that federal and state governments spend billions annually to subsidize and sustain single parent families, resulting from divorce and non marital childbearing, suggesting that strengthening marriage is more cost effective than managing the fallout of family disintegration. There may be some truth to this. I got to give nod to them. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't, but there are some other solutions too. You can have community family. And I'm speaking as a child of that. Even though I grew up and I remember at one point my mom had food stamps or some other uh, services to help us out. I grew up in a community where my great aunts lived next door. Another great aunt was over here. I was near cousins. We went to the church. We had all this stuff. So there was not like this strain on the government to raise us in a single parent home. So you can't, this can be argued to a point. They cite social science data suggesting here goes the data. We can sway. You remember this data can be construed any way you wish, suggesting children of divorced parents are more likely to experience emotional problems, higher suicide rates, lower academic performance, and a higher probability of divorcing themselves as adults. Interesting. All right. Maybe one of the things could be that their parents weren't supposed to be together in the first place. So that might be why they divorce. The children grow up being divorced because they repeat that pattern. Not they repeat the pattern of the divorce. They repeat the pattern of not knowing how to establish a good relationship. So this is some of the stuff they want to do because this is what they're looking at doing. Ending no fault divorce. Mandatory requirements. Ask about this. If you know politicians and you want to be the person to fight against what the Heritage Foundation is championing, go out and do it. You might already be that person who's participating. They support laws requiring couples with children to complete divorce education and a mediated co-parenting plan before they can file for divorce, covenant marriage, as a legal option where couples agree to stricter requirements and longer waiting periods for divorce, financial disincentives. So, what this is telling me too, from this Heritage Foundation and a conservative perspective, it helps the government for you to stay married. It may help the divorce lawyers and the other people for you to get divorced, but it actually helps the government for you to stay married. It helps the state. It helps the legal system for you to stay married. This is one of the connections to Project 2025. In the recent 2026 report, Saving America by Saving the Family, Heritage authors who also led the Project 2025 initiative further emphasize these views, framing easy divorce as part of a path towards social decline and calling for a cultural recommitment to marriage. Okay, I gotta say something about this because Joan mentioned it in her clip. So they make it easy to get married, but they don't want to make it as easy to get divorced. Because what if there's some abuse, infidelity, all kinds of stuff going on in your marriage? Why shouldn't that be as simple to get out of? Why does it make sense for you to get in the marriage but not get out? And people may make the argument, because I'm going to bring it up because I know you're going to say it. Well, you shouldn't be able to get out of it. It's a covenant between you and God. When you agreed, you should have bound by the contract. But here's the thing, if it's a legal contract, why can you easily get out of some other form of a legal contract? Like a lease agreement. Just asking. An employee agreement. I'm a musician too. Yeah, granted, some of these musicians contract have not been easy to escape. However, they've become easier over the years because a lot of artists have started to stand up for themselves. Why shouldn't it be easy to get out of the contract? Because it's just a contract, right? Makes you wonder. Things that make you go, this is something you should question. Why is this statistic still being reported, even by the Heritage Foundation? because it serves their purpose. It serves, you saw what they do. It's they talking about stuff from the 1970s, and it's what, 2026, 2027, 2028. They still stuck on 1973. And they still stuck there because they mad because they lost. I'm just saying. Some people still mad because they lost the Civil War. Like, come on. Okay. We got one last thing, and then this will be the conclusion of this story. Okay, let me hop to it here. We always close out with a quote because I want to give you some words of encouragement. This is our quote today. Divorce isn't such a tragedy. A tragedy is staying in an unhappy marriage, teaching your children the wrong things about love. Nobody ever died of divorce. This is from Jennifer Weiner. That's correct. Who do you know who died of divorce? And people may be like, oh, yeah, that person. No, they didn't. They probably died of a health condition. They didn't die of divorce. Divorce isn't a tragedy. With this, they are trying to make you fear divorce. You no longer have to fear divorce. You really don't have to fear anything but fear itself. I'm going to use that quote. And it's okay to have fear, but don't live in fear and don't allow anybody else to place fear on you. Because that's what they're doing with these statistics, with their own beliefs, what they want you to believe. Form your own opinion. Sit, reflect, analyze, and ask your higher self, is this true for me? Is this good for me? This has been another edition of News and Views. We will see you next time. Peace.